get this party going.
Both is Misty.
Ellie, Donald, Leary.
Recording in progress.
Yeah. All right, so today is Wednesday, June 17th. This is a regularly scheduled public facilities meeting. I am here with Councilor Albright from Ward 2, Councilor Getz from Ward 5, Councilor Gordon from Ward 6, Councilor Grossman from Ward 7. I'm Councilor Kalis from Ward 8. We have Lisa Pinnell, City Clerk, as well as Curtis Bucher, who is our new City Clerk. Welcome. We have Councilor Julia Maliki as well, and Commissioner Valcarce. I think that's it right now.
Josh Morse
Is he there?
Oh, and Sean Sullivan was there.
Oh, I didn't see Sean. Okay, our Commissioner of Public Works, Sean O'Sullivan, is here.
Okay.
There's COO Morse is here as well. Great. And then I think that Manager of Financial Services, Doug Botelho, will be joining if he's not here.
He's there as well.
Oh, he's there. Great. Okay, so he's here too. All right. So item 216-26 to repurpose of $150,000 and transfer of $177,000 for renovations at Fire Station 2. Is honor the mayor requesting authorization to repurpose $150,000 from docket item 120-25 and transfer $177,000 from account 01C11546524070 public buildings repair and maintenance to account number 7834 B115-582500 building improvements, Fire Station 1 and 2 improvements for renovations to the shower and locker room at Fire Station 2. Mr. Valcarce, will you be presenting this one?
Yes.
Right, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Kalis. Good evening, everyone. And thank you for taking this up. So this is the request to repurpose the funds to redo the shower and locker rooms at Station 2. This was the item I brought up in April, and at the very last minute realized that one of my funding source descriptions was incorrect. And so the matter was, no action was taken. But we did have a good conversation that night, and Councilor Albright suggested having a trip to Stations 1 and 2, which we did in early May, along with Chief Gentile and Chief Bianchi, and we went through the buildings and we went through the various spaces. Again, this is a result of the chief going back and kind of analyzing his spaces and realizing that the locker room renovation project was really the highest priority for him to get done. So the way we determined to do it was to repurpose these funds, which were already allocated for projects at Fire Station 1 and 2, to do the shower room, locker room renovation at 2. And then he would have the ability to kind of take restock and kind of continue to analyze and look at the spaces and come up with a sort of an overall plan for both buildings. Both buildings need some work in the future. They're the oldest buildings we have. So in the packet, I included a little key plan of the area we're working in. Again, some people got to see the space firsthand. I included a little high-level annotated key plan and some photos of the area in question that we are going to renovate. And our budget, we have a proposal. We worked with our on-call contractors to get the best proposal we could get, which we got from Homer. And our little budget is set out there. So it's $279,000 for construction. We're carrying about $10,000 for some asbestos removal. There may be some mastic and waterproofing. Again, we have to open up these plumbing walls, and we're not exactly sure what's going to be in there. A little bit of money for some fixtures and furnishings for the bathroom, and some funds to look at the ventilation system to make sure that that's up to speed as well. And some contingency funding, because again, we're going to open up some walls that haven't been opened up since 1963. So that's the crux of what we're looking to do. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Commissioner, and welcome Councilor Kelly from Ward 3 and Councilor Donlevette from Ward 4. Questions, Councilor Albright?
So I want to thank Commissioner Valcarce for taking us on a tour. We did see both stations, and I didn't understand the need to move the money. But now, having seen the problem firsthand, I see the reason why these things are being prioritized. So when the time comes, I'm happy to move approval.
Right. Councilor Getz?
The only other comment in having done the tour as well, was, yes, the need is there, and there's even more need. Yes, unfortunately, including, the sleeping quarters, they're not up to standard. So my hope is that at some future point, we address that, because I think that that's a pretty high on the list need.
Yeah, we'll get with the chief and go through, 2 weeks ago, we now authorize the second phase of the electrical completion of the HVAC, which is great because that moves the building into closer to being all electric. And then we'll continue to pick off with the chief as he prioritizes. The two buildings need some work. They're the oldest two fire stations we have. So I don't think anybody would deny that they need some work. We just need to get a good plan with the chief of his priorities, and then how do we work through the buildings, to do it in a logical fashion.
Councilor Donlevette?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Commissioner Valcarce. It was really nice, as Councilor Albright mentioned, to go for a tour and see the spaces, and it was really helpful to understand them. Could you let us know, you might have answered this when we toured and I've just forgotten, are the toilet and bathroom and shower stalls being rebuilt, changed, replaced?
Yeah, so we're going to open up the plumbing wall that in that diagram, in that plan, is between the showers and the toilet and urinal area, because that plumbing is going to have to obviously get reworked. We're going to reduce the shower stalls from 3 to 2 based on the way they actually work now and the way the station is staffed, and reduction of one of the sinks. So that area will get reworked, and we'll be looking at the plumbing inside the wall. And then there'll be new stall compartment and items that are in our scope of work. So
will those stalls be rebuilt with full height doors? I'm asking this primarily to understand if, as we hopefully increase the gender diversity in our amongst our firefighters, being able to create private stalls that are more accommodating for a broader spectrum of genders would be great to have.
Yeah, we haven't planned for it in this particular scope, but we could certainly look at it and discuss it with the chief.
Great, thank you.
I have a question as well. Commissioner, it's one room, correct? Based on the picture.
It's one long room. If you kind of look at the best place to look is the little key plan. It's like the first one that I annotated.
Yeah.
So it's one long room. There's a door at each end, and basically one half of the room is the shower, bathroom, toilet room area, washroom area as it's called, and the other half is the locker room area.
Right, what jumped out to me is the cost. Like $280,000 for one room. I was like, that seems like a lot of money. Was it competitively bid, or was it, did you just go to whoever we typically use? How is that done?
So we solicited quotes from both our on-call contractors. We use our on-call contractors because this is kind of the easiest way, again, without drawing a lot of plans and adding expense of, no offense to the architects, I'm an architect, but it doesn't rise to the level of needing, that kind of plan. You're probably really glad you didn't see the bid from the other contractor then, because it was very high, and we worked hard with both contractors to get them working on the scope. By far, Homer's number was much lower, and kind of really where I think what would land between, we're redoing the flooring, we're changing all the lockers, we're gonna upgrade the lighting, we're doing painting, and then we have this unknown inside the walls that we're gonna have to deal with. So it is a big chunk of money, but based on the numbers we see today, it's not that bad. It's not too bad.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right, there's a motion from Councilor Albright for approval. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? All right, this passes unanimously.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner. All right, then, 197-26, transfer of $900,000 for improvements to roadways, sidewalks, and ramps. His Honor the Mayor requesting authorization to transfer the sum of $900,000 from account 0140120-511002 DPW Street Division full-time wages to account number 014-121-553300 DPW admin support, paving supplies for the improvement of the city's roadways, sidewalks, and ramps. This we've already seen. We approved it 5-0 to 1 on 6-3. I'm glad this could be referred back to us so quickly. Thank you, Mr. Beaker. All right, so Mr. Botelho, will you present on this one?
Sure. I don't know if the commissioner, excuse me, wants to chime in as well. I'm here for, I have the backup financial data as to the account it's going to, but I'll defer to the Commissioner of Public Works.
Okay.
I'm happy to present. Can everyone hear me? I'm at
Yeah.
a conference and my internet's a little shaky. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for acting on this so quickly. I'm requesting an amendment to docket item 19726 to transfer $900,000 in salary attrition from the Streets Division budget to the Snow and Ice budget rather than to the paving supplies override account as originally requested. This amendment is necessary due to the late submission of invoices from one of the city's largest snow and ice contractors. Although the contractor provided plowing services during the winter, the contract was not fully executed until the end of May, and the contractor subsequently submitted approximately $850,000 in invoices only about a week ago. Our streets director and our finance team have reviewed and verified that the charges are accurate and reflect the work performed. We are also in response to this situation. We are implementing several corrective measures. First, we are revising our snow and ice contracts to clearly state that contractors whose agreements are not fully executed prior to the winter season will not be utilized for snow and ice operations. Second, our finance team is developing enhanced tracking and reporting procedures to improve real-time monitoring of snow and ice expenditures. This amendment will ensure that all valid snow and ice obligations are properly funded. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Commissioner. So do we need
Thank
to
you.
amend this with the right account number?
I would say yes. I'm sure Mr. Botello has those account numbers.
Language too.
Yes, I do have the account number. I believe I spoke to Lisa to get a chair's note with that in there. If not, I can provide.
Yeah, if you could provide. So this is going to, is it DPW Snow and Ice?
Yes, sir. It's going to Snow and Ice, which would be account 0140123-527301 Snow Ice Control.
Let me read it back to you. 0140123-527301.
Yes, sir.
Snow and Ice. Okay, and is it just DPW Snow and Ice Division?
It's the Snow and Ice Control
Okay.
account.
All right. So, any questions on this item? Councilor Grossman.
Thank you very much. So this is the item that I stood up on second call to refer back the other night. My main question is, obviously, the funding that we're repurposing here was planned to go into paving the transportation network improvement program. What is the current thinking about how we're gonna make up the loss of that funding in the planned improvements for transportation and paving in the coming fiscal year? Anyone?
Is, you want me to address that specifically? I don't know if, our COO wants to chime in.
I figured either the commissioner or COO would.
I'm happy. Yeah, I'm happy to. So, thank you very much. Solid question. I think, ultimately, DPW had salary savings. In this case, we were taking advantage of those salary savings to invest them in our paving program. What I would anticipate is, in this case, because we are utilizing those funds, to cover the balance of our snow and ice removal. If you take a step back, if we were to have those bills that Shauna mentioned earlier, our previous ask to fully fund the snow and ice would have increased our free cash draw by the amount that we're talking about tonight. So in essence, what we're doing is we are utilizing salary savings that otherwise would have rolled the free cash in the fall and then likely been repurposed for some amount of paving. And instead, we're using that money ahead of time to pay down the balance of the snow and ice that we have to cover. So ultimately, kind of an accounting just shell game, one fiscal year to the next, but ultimately lands in the same place at the very end of the day.
So let me make sure I fully understand. So essentially, are you saying that then unutilized free cash from this year will flow forward to take care of the paving improvements?
Yeah, well, I guess I'll restate, see if I can try to make it clarified a bit. But if we had got these bills for snow and ice sooner, when we came in a few months back and got our final free cash request to cover the balance of the snow and ice for this entire season, we would have used up more of the free cash available to us now. Because we did not, we are now asking to allocate the salary savings from the DPW budget to cover the snow and ice overage, which otherwise would have been used for paving. If we had not needed to use this, we would have used the free cash, and these salary savings would have carried forward to the next fiscal year, been certified as free cash in the fall, and then it would have been used to draw from for our paving program. So it's ultimately, that's what I mean by saying it lands in the same place at the end of the day.
Okay, so I can ask these questions in more detail at finance, but I suppose that's not really what I'm understanding, because it seems to me that these salary savings were not going to drop to free cash because we had allocated them to paving. So I guess what I'm looking for is which funds are now dropping to free cash that we're going to use for paving in the new fiscal year.
No, I'm sorry. There is, so it's not that there is it's not that there is money that is going to drop to free cash that we would use next year. What I'm saying is that if we had requested the $900,000 a few months ago, if we got all these bills sooner, we would have used more of this current year's free cash that we have available to us. We are not, and instead we're using the salary savings from the DPW budget to cover the snow and ice overage. If we had used the free cash, we would have used this salary savings for our paving program, and we would then not need to rely on next year's free cash to supplement the $900,000 of paving, if that makes sense. And if I'm not being clear, Doug or Maureen, feel free to jump in and
I think
clarify.
you are. I mean, I think what I'm understanding, and again, maybe Maureen, correct me, and Doug, correct me if I'm wrong, is that next year, when we know what our free cash is, we're gonna need to draw from free cash to make up for this roadway.
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry.
I just wanted to make sure the answer wasn't gonna be, we're gonna do $900,000 less of road work, but the unfortunate answer is we have, we have $900,000 less than to do other things.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
We get that. Counselor Albright.
That last question and answer solved my problem.
Okay, good. Counselor Getz?
And, thank you.
Oh,
Here.
Oh,
Sorry.
it's okay, no, go ahead,
Okay.
hold on.
No, the only other piece was for Commissioner Sullivan. And you think that this will, what you were talking about in terms of the contracts and next year's cycle, you think that that's sufficient to resolve and that we will never see this happen again?
I do believe that this will solve the issue.
Okay.
Great,
Counselor Kelly?
Thanks. Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is, I think, much simpler. I believe I heard, and by the way, Josh Morse, your answer was not simple. That was not a simple answer. I believe I heard Commissioner Sullivan say the bill for the snow and ice control account this year that came in late was for $850,000, but you're asking for 900, and I'm just wondering, why would you not be asking for 850? Or do you want to just cover the extra and have 50,000 extra? Why is the amount slightly different? I think that's for you, Commissioner Sullivan.
I want to ensure that if an additional invoice comes in, we have the funding to cover it.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions?
This league.
Okay, so here's what I'm looking for, a motion to amend the existing item. So it reads to transfer the sum of $900,000 from account number 0140120-511002. DPW Street Division full-time wages to account 0140123-527301 snow ice control. Do I hear a motion for that? So moved from Councilor Grossman. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, it's unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we then have to approve it?
Yeah. You amended it, right?
Mhm.
That was that piece.
Yes.
Now we have to approve.
Yeah.
So now we have to approve the full item, 197-26. Okay, is there a motion to approve the amended item?
Motion to approve.
Councilor Grossman motions to approve the amended item. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, that passes unanimously.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I know.
Yep.
Here we go.
Okay, so item 40-26, request for discussion and study on the option of removing the Fellows Pond Dam. Councilors Leary, Roach, and Kelly requesting a discussion and study on the option of dam removal at Fellows Pond. The discussion should include the options potential to improve public safety, restore ecosystems, improve wildlife habitat, preserve mature trees, and increase climate resilience, and to be cost-effective, one-time solution compared to the significant cost of building and maintaining new dam infrastructure. Now, this is, we have Josh Morse, Chief Operating Officer, joining us. He's going to discuss all design options for the Fellows Pond Dam Rehabilitation Project, including that specific request. COO Morse, we look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you very much. So I have a presentation this evening. There was a pretty ample amount of backup included in the item. I hope everybody had a chance to read through that. Included in there was the criteria matrix. Anybody who's done any large projects with us in the past, that should look familiar. And then there is a narrative that explains the entire criteria matrix. I hope that helps kind of walk through the thinking for each one of those. And then there's a copy of the draft letter of the working group with their recommendation to the mayor. So with that,
Forward, COO. So that was all very clear. It was great. Are you looking for us to approve the item, or what are you looking for us from us tonight, just so we can put it in context?
I'm looking for you to have a good time and learn a lot about dams and approaches to addressing dams. I am not looking for a vote this evening.
Okay.
Yep. So yeah, this evening really is just an opportunity. So I will preface this also by saying I'm not a dam engineer. That's why at this stage, I'm trying to keep, you'll see, I'm going to try to keep it relatively high level. For those of you that know me, my version of high level is probably a little further in the weeds than most, but I will also just say that the materials you received were all worked through with GEI, with our engineers. So while the information I'm covering this evening is very high level, the backup that you received is all with input directly from our consultant. So I think one of the things, before I share screen and start going through the presentation, I think one of the things that's important to point out, and I mentioned this at our Q&A session with the community where GEI and I fielded questions, is that this ultimately, I wish, the projects have been going on for 7 years now, so it's been a very long road with lots and lots of work for a very long time. I would love to be able to go back in time, because I think the one thing that I would do at the very beginning, if I could, would have been to reframe the conversation, because I think for a long time, the focus was too narrow and it was just how do we comply with ODS? And I wish we had taken a higher 30,000 foot view right out of the gate to say, well, yes, we need to comply with ODS. What else should we be doing? What else should we be looking at? How does this fit into our larger plan? Those kinds of broader high level questions. Because if you're just looking at complying with ODS, you may come to a very different conclusion than if you're looking at all of the other factors that come into play with something like this. I will also just say, before I start, that I've spent a while now reading. I've read, I think, more than 20 after action reports of almost every major dam failure in the United States in our history. And I think what's fascinating about that is that two things that hit me with it. One is every single situation is unique. There is no one size fits all solution to any one of these problems. They are very unique. And two, it amazed me that every single problem, every single dam failure was traced back to something that started very, very small and ultimately could have been avoided. So I'll leave you with that. But so let me share screen and we will walk through the presentation.
You have that?
Yeah, it does.
Oh, great.
Yeah, I'm loading it up right now. This might take a minute. It's almost 400 megabytes. That is not because it has a million slides. I have a lot of videos in here. Okay. So the intent of this presentation is to come at this from a very high level. As I said, I have a lot of pictures and some videos. I'll walk you through each one of these. If we want to go really deep, we can go through the narrative as well. But I think this is probably the right level for this evening. So there were, over the 7-year period, there were a lot of different options that were studied, some of which don't comply with ODS. So those were eliminated relatively early. Ultimately, what our working group and our consultant really focused on was a comparison of 4 final alternatives: dam removal, a new core wall dam, a buried sea camp pile wall, and downstream erosion protection. Just to put that in very simple terms, dam removal means no more dam. The next two are new dams, basically new dams. The difference between the two, aside from the design, is that a new core wall dam replaces the existing core wall. A buried sea camp pile wall dam is an additional dam that will offer not only meets ODS and stands on its own as a dam embedded in bedrock, but also offers some level of downstream protection and shoring of the existing 128-year-old dam. And then downstream erosion protection is not a dam replacement, but it is actually shoring up the downstream side of the existing 128-year-old dam to try to minimize the likelihood of a dam breach and minimize impacts of overtopping, which are kind of interconnected, which I'll explain a little further in the presentation. So ultimately, the criteria matrix, when we went through this as a working group with GEI as well, we identified the dam removal scoring -8, a new core wall at +1, buried seat camp pile wall at +7, and downstream erosion protection at -1. So dam removal, we had a lengthy presentation or a lengthy meeting with the community on this a few weeks back now. The estimated cost from GEI for the upfront cost, I should say, is $16.2 million to $22.1 million. The life cycle cost is very hard to nail down on this, and I'll explain why at the very end of the presentation. But ultimately, the primary driver of the life cycle cost is that our Laundry Brook, which is the Laundry Brook culvert, which you see in the left-hand side here, this is kind of the beginning of it, at least from the downstream side, travels from Walnut Street, which is what you're looking at in that picture, all the way through Newton and ultimately into Watertown before it hits the Charles. So it's approximately 2.1 miles of culvert that covers a lot of properties. That culvert is undersized to meet the or to allow us to do to remove the dam and not see any increased risk of flooding in the various models that we looked at. The other thing that GEI presented is that in the dam removal option, it ultimately led to increased flooding downstream in I think it was 25-year storms and under. So in your, I would say smaller storms, but those are still very large storms, you would see an increased risk of flooding downstream. And those are all modeled. We presented some of those at the community meeting, and those models are either just got posted or are about to be posted on our website, including the backup too. I know, Lisa, I see you on the screen here. We got the backup posted today, and then I have an executive summary coming out as well. Hopefully get that up tomorrow. So as I said, very expensive life cycle cost on the dam removal, reduced stormwater storage because Bullows Pond acts as a stormwater storage location. There would be some level of stormwater storage that would exist even with the dam removed, but it certainly would be less than what exists there now. As I mentioned, higher downstream risk of flooding results in significant property value reductions. So you can see in the narrative that I worked with our assessor's office, Jim Shaughnessy. Thank you, Jim. He took a look at what that would do to the assessed values, obviously different than appraised values, but the assessed values were, it was north of $6 million in reduction in assessed values for the properties immediately abutting Bullows Pond. The reason why I point out the assessed values is because of Proposition 2.5 and the tax levy balancing out. If we reduce the value of the properties surrounding Bullows Pond, it ultimately shifts that tax burden to the rest of our residents in Newton. The other thing that I found a little fascinating about this, oh, and I'm sorry, the reduction in appraised value is somewhere north of $20 million impact for the surrounding homes. The other thing I found interesting is that there's a lot of market data in there, so trust but verify. Anybody can find this online. The waterfront properties, especially in communities which are deemed to be exclusive real estate, meaning that they're hard to come by, which I think Newton probably falls in that category. Waterfront properties are, because they're harder to find in a community that it can be hard to find property in, they appreciate faster and therefore their assessed values increase faster. So they are a bit of a balancing effect from a Prop 2.5 standpoint because they shoulder a higher tax burden than non-waterfront properties. So just I thought that was an interesting little piece of information to include. And then from a community standpoint, I think the council has seen a very large number of residents who have reached out to you, and I know they've reached out to me. We have seen a very strong opposition to dam removal. New core wall dam. So the upfront cost for this was $13.9 million to $18 million. Full life cycle cost, $15.45 million to $19.55 million, with a 75 to 100 year lifespan. preserves the storage capacity, has a low breach risk, and a moderate utility disruption. Ultimately, and the drawings that you have down below, this is just for visual purposes. This is not an engineered plan. Ultimately, what ends up happening with the new core wall is we would remove the existing core wall. We would build a new core wall, and ultimately we would then have a brand new dam, and ideally it would last another 100 years. The primary difference between this and the Seacamp Pile Wall Dam is that the Seacamp Pile Wall Dam, ultimately, because it goes on the downstream side, it affords some level of downstream erosion protection, which I'll explain in the slides coming up. It's less expensive, and it ultimately has a better overall structural design from a longevity standpoint. So buried Seacamp Pile Wall Dam. The upfront cost, 8.4 million to 11 million. Life cycle cost, 9.95 million to 12.55 million. Again, similar to the core wall, 75 to 100 plus year lifespan. It has the lowest breach risk. And part of the reason that it has that, as you can see in the picture down below, from the Seacamp Pile Wall Dam, it basically has interlocking teeth, if you will, for lack of a better word, that create a very strong kind of structural system that is less prone to tree roots getting into cracks, crack propagation, things like that. So it's a pretty solid approach. The other kind of nice thing about it is it's less intrusive. It's a little easier to install than the core wall, and that is picked up in the fact that it has no utility disruption. It's a lot easier to pull off, especially in this application. As I mentioned, it provides some level of downstream erosion protection, which I'll explain in a sec. So this is again, not an engineered drawing, but I wanted to show you roughly where the Seacamp Pile Wall Dam would go. So the existing dam is the yellow line here. This is the spillway, and Bullows Pond is down at the bottom of the page. A new Seacamp Pile Wall Dam would be on the downstream side of Dexter Road. The reason why that's important is the existing dam would remain in place. The new dam would be constructed. There would be no disruption in utilities. But I think what's really important or interesting to me is that one of the advantages of this is that you get a double layer of protection. So you have the existing core wall dam that protects, or that offers your first layer of protection. And then you have the Seacamp Pile Wall Dam to plan north that offers a second layer of protection. The other nice thing about this is that you get, as I mentioned before, a level of downstream protection, downstream erosion protection. And the reason for that is that you have Dexter Road in between the two that under most circumstances would remain intact and would stay solid. Both the Seacamp Pile Wall and the new core wall dam, just from a high level standpoint, they don't breach. They're very solid. You of course can have water, like if flooding is bad enough, they can go out the edges around the sides, like that's always possible. That's possible in really any scenario if the water gets high enough. But I just wanted to point out that this is one of the advantages of the Seacamp Pile Wall concept. Obviously, as I think I mentioned before, less expensive as well. All right, I'm gonna play this and we'll see if all these videos work. Sorry, Watertown.
There's no audio here. I see you.
Mr. Morris, was there supposed to be volume or audio that goes along with these videos?
Oh, you couldn't hear any of this?
No, very quiet. Silence.
Oh, no. I'm sorry.
I didn't want to interrupt.
Yeah.
I thought you could hear all this. Ouch.
Exactly, this is where we throw our sins away.
We're enjoying the people of the woods.
It's literally, yeah, on either side of that.
We got perspective of what it is.
For a while.
All right. I'm not sure why that didn't come through on your end, but I'm not gonna subject you to watching that entire video again.
So you want to just summarize?
Yeah, I'm just gonna click through and I'll show you what I was basically getting at. So this is Dexter Road. I'll wait till everybody's ready.
Yep.
Okay.
We're just cracking each other up.
All right. So this is Dexter Road. What I was pointing out in the video is that the existing core wall dam runs basically along this side. The buried sea camp pile wall dam would run on the other side of Dexter Road. What I was pointing out is that one of the options we looked at was downstream erosion protection. One of the concerns that the working group had was that downstream erosion protection is shoring up the downstream side of the existing dam, but that existing dam is 128 years old, and we're approaching this project from the perspective of trying to last another century. And many members of the working group felt like on the other end of this, relying on a 228-year-old dam is probably asking an awful lot. So I then just took you over. I showed you the spillway and the outlet, and then the reason that I took you down this way is I wanted to show a few things. One, this is Walnut Street above. This is the culvert entrance. I'm standing with my back to the kind of spillway from the dam. This is the primary choke point, and this is actually the larger of the two. Once it gets over to Hull Street, it actually gets smaller. And then it's small, it's too small, all the way over to Watertown. So when we talk about the life cycle cost of dam removal, one of the primary concerns we have is the capacity of Laundry Brook Culvert after it leaves the spillway all the way out until it ultimately hits the Charles. So that is one of our primary concerns. The other thing that we talked about a bit in that meeting is that it's a little hard to tell from this perspective, but this big wall that you're looking at here ultimately goes all the way up to Walnut Street. In an overtopping event, if we're above Dexter Road in any of those options, but certainly with dam removal, you are now beyond the flow rate capacity of the culvert. And now you start to have water against this wall. And one of the concerns that we have is that in dam removal, we would essentially be shifting the dam burden to Walnut Street. So the concern is that we might actually then be relying in those extreme events on Walnut Street to act as an earthen dam. And if this sidewall were to fail, it would be cataclysmic. So that's one thing to think about. And I will jump to the next one. All right, so downstream erosion protection. I'm going to explain this one a little further, simply, I think, because it warrants it, because the upfront cost is significantly less. So the upfront cost for downstream erosion protection is $3 to $4 million. The life cycle cost is a wide range, and I'll explain why in a sec. $28.3 million to $104 million. The reason for this is we don't know exactly how long the downstream erosion protection system will last. And I'll explain that part of the reason why in the next slide. You can, depending on what you read, some literature tells you that it's 25 to 50 years. Other literature will tell you 50 to 75 years. But the one thing that is clear in reading all of the literature on this is that if you are looking to maximize your lifespan of your downstream erosion protection system, you need to spend significantly more on your annual maintenance to make sure that is being kept completely clear of all vegetation, that it's being done in the correct way, that you're not having any settling of your articulated concrete blocks, and that everything is staying nice and smooth and staying as designed. So it had the highest maintenance burden and had the highest long-term risk of breach. And the reason for that is the shortened lifespan. Again, we looked at all of these options over a 100-year period. So this is another thing that I wanted to point out. This is not an engineered plan. I took the engineering plan for the downstream erosion protection and roughly sketched out where it falls on an aerial. The red area is where the downstream erosion protection directionally would be. The point of this slide is not really to show that as much as it is to show that the blue section shows a very large area between the spillway and when the water enters the culvert under Walnut Street, where there is no downstream erosion protection. When water gets high, you saw me walking through the woods down there, there are a lot of trees, there's a lot of organics, there's a lot of earth there that would not be protected from that downstream erosion system. So I think it's important just to point that out. I'm going to show you a bunch of different examples here. I do not want to imply at all that these pictures are relative or comparable to Bullo's Pond or Laundry Brook. These are enormous systems, but you'll understand why I showed some of these pictures. So I think when I started really looking into downstream erosion protection, there are a lot of different ways that this system can fail and has failed. So you can get edge and toe scour, which is basically erosion at the edges, uplift of the articulated concrete block, mats or the ACB, piping or channeling under the mats, which can then cause them to shift and then ultimately potentially break free. Disintegration of the articulated concrete block over time. I will say on that one, the systems have gotten better. They do last longer than the very first versions that came out, but they still have a lower life expectancy than dam replacement. And then settling and shifting of articulated concrete block resulting in increased cable or system pressure, meaning that when everything is nice and smooth, it works great. But if you get any shifting of those concrete blocks, it creates catch points for that water if you do get an overtopping event, which increases the cable pressure, which can result in failure. So the pictures on the right were the Portuguese cofferdam in 2010. And this is really just to show that in an overtopping event, you certainly do have restoration needs. It is not kind of a set it and forget it approach. So I thought this was interesting too, because in some of the after actions I read with respect to articulated concrete block and downstream erosion protection, there were some questions about what happens when you get multiple rain events. And in this case, for Bullo's Pond, what would happen if we get multiple overtopping events? So I thought, just for some historical context, in 2024, Hurricane Helene dropped 30.78 inches of rain in Florida. 13 days later, Hurricane Milton dropped another 14.01 inches of rain. Hold on to those values because you don't need anywhere near that kind of water to experience issues here in Newton. Florida isn't Newton, but climate change is coming, or the climate is changing, and the potential for back-to-back heavy rainfalls over this next century in Newton is pretty high. If the first storm degrades the downstream erosion protection system, but the 128-year-old dam holds, the second storm is far more likely to result in a dam breach, as we will not have had time to replace the downstream erosion protection system. So I also found it interesting that, and again, this information is all available online. I'm happy to send information to whoever's interested, but there are roughly 92,000 dams in the United States, and only 0.2% of those dams rely on articulated concrete block downstream erosion protection systems. 75% of those articulated concrete block systems have been installed since 2000. So there's limited information on the life expectancy for these relatively novel systems. I think that's a really important consideration. So when we're trying to nail down how long this lasts, it's very hard. And it's also relatively difficult to get a lot of good data on how these systems hold up, not only from a maintenance standpoint, but how they hold up to flood events, because there's just not nearly as many of them as there are dams. So The other thing about downstream erosion protection that hit me while I was out there, and thank you to Councilor Albright, she started asking some questions that led me to go spend some time out on the pond. I think when you look, if you look closely here, and we're looking, this is Dexter Road that runs left to right, and I'll hit play in a second, but which you won't hear, but I'll narrate this time. I think what's interesting, or what really struck me, is that downstream erosion protection protects the other side of the dam, and that's basic dam engineering. That's what you want. But Dexter Road is just a few inches of asphalt sitting on top of earth. And the upstream side of the dam is just earth, exposed earth, some trees, some roots, some bushes. But ultimately, if we get a large flooding event that overtops Dexter Road, you're going to have some level of current flowing against an unprotected upstream side of Dexter Road. As you'll see in some of the videos I'm going to show you, it takes very, very little to get some piping or channeling underneath Dexter Road. And if you get any kind of water on the backside of the downstream erosion protection system, it is not designed to withstand that. So, and if the downstream erosion protection system blows out with a 128-year-old dam in an overtopping situation, that is where you have a much higher likelihood of dam breach. So just looking right here, you'll see this is what I was talking about from the other side, pond to the left, Dexter Road to the right. If we have water hitting here, we are now, and I'll just go slowly, you can see Dexter Road right here. If we get any water that starts to get underneath the sidewalk or underneath the road, you're going to start to undermine Dexter Road pretty quick. And now you're sending water on the underside of that downstream erosion protection, which will make sense in a sec. All right. So downstream erosion protection, if you're looking at this, this is Dexter Road right here, this gray area. This on the right is our pond. This is the existing concrete core wall dam. Downstream erosion protection is this gray area on the left. My concern is that if we have an overtopping event that overtops Dexter, the theory behind this is that water flows over the downstream side and the erosion protection prevents all of this earth from washing out and then resulting in a dam breach. But one of the things that makes me nervous about this is that if we get any water at all, even small amounts, it will happen very quickly, which you'll see in a minute. We could start getting water under Dexter Road. Dexter Road can fail. The piping starts to get underneath your downstream erosion protection, and then we're in trouble. So just to walk you right through this, water level rises, you start to see overtopping of Dexter Road. This is that piping or channeling that I was talking about, where you start to get some water that's sneaking in underneath Dexter Road and getting on the backside of downstream erosion protection. Dexter Road ultimately fails. Water pressure increases on the backside of downstream erosion protection. And then ultimately, if that downstream erosion protection lets go, which if it had head pressure on the backside would be likely, you have a much higher increased risk of breach of the existing core wall dam. So this can happen, and this is another one that I think is interesting. I think that over the last 7 years, there was a lot of focus on your 24-hour storms. What we're seeing all over the place is that, yes, those are something that we should plan for, absolutely. But we're seeing a lot more of these short burst storms that are overwhelming our systems that are not over a 24-hour period. You're seeing 2, 3, 4, sometimes more inches of rain over a few hours, and that can be very problematic. So this was 2023 in Hillsborough, New Hampshire. They received 2 to 4 inches of rain in an 8-hour period, which is not a tremendous amount. This is on Washington Road. Anybody that wants to go do a street view, you can take a look at this. This was a tiny little brook, so this is not much, but it just shows what Mother Nature is ultimately capable of. So I just hit play. It'll. And what you couldn't hear there was a bunch of people laughing. I'm not sure why they were laughing, but ultimately that just shows you that a relatively small brook with a fairly modest amount of rain can be very damaging to a roadway, much like Dexter Road. So what do downstream erosion protection systems and airbags have in common? Airbags help limit injuries in a car accident. Downstream erosion protection systems help limit downstream erosion and reduce the likelihood of a dam breach. Even better than an airbag is to avoid the car accident altogether. Replacing the dam instead of installing downstream erosion protection is like avoiding the car accident and therefore not needing the airbag. Replacing the dam with a new secant pile wall dam is like avoiding the car accident and having an airbag, because again, you get some level of downstream erosion protection and you get that kind of double layer of protection. So this is an example. If nothing else, I just want to show it because I found this video amazing. This is not, again, at all comparable to what we're talking about with Bullows, but what this does certainly show, this is the Oroville Dam spillway. This is downstream erosion protection is basically anything that is hardened to prevent water from destroying it. The spillway was hardened to try to prevent that, and ultimately it ate itself up fast. It's pretty, again, just amazing, the sheer force of Mother Nature. It really is. Again, I will say, you'll hear me say this many times, I'm not comparing this to Bullows Pond, but it does show you that it doesn't take long for Mother Nature to come up on the winning end of these things. This is another video of what can happen with articulated concrete block, even with cable reinforce. I'm just gonna play this. If you look close, you can see some of the cables and supporting systems. Ultimately, again, if you get water that gets underneath those mats, it's game over. And the reason why I wanted to show this is, again, thinking about that Dexter Road, if we get water underneath those mats, we could be looking at a situation just like this. So key risk comparisons, the secant pile wall has the lowest breach risk. Core wall has a low breach risk. Erosion protection, elevated long-term risk, and dam removal, increased overtopping and system risk. Financial comparison, lowest life cycle cost, buried secant pile wall. Moderate life cycle cost was the core wall. Highest life cycle cost was erosion protection and dam removal. 100-year life cycle cost for dam removal, anywhere from $100 to $200 million plus. Again, I'll explain why in a sec. New core wall dam, and I've already read these numbers, but that's what we're ultimately looking at there. So conclusions, based on the criteria matrix, the buried secant pile wall alternative received the highest overall score and combines the lowest estimated construction costs with the strongest long-term risk profile. This option was overwhelmingly supported by the working group, the consultant, the city engineer, and the Commissioner of Public Works. This option has also been supported by the overwhelming majority of residents who have expressed their opinion on the Bullows Pond Dam project to date. So this is the Laundry Culvert after it leaves the Bullows Pond. This map is available online as well, but I just highlighted the blue section because it's a little hard to see it. But so this is the 2.12 miles of culvert that I was referencing that we would need to address, and we eventually will need to address as part of our larger stormwater project. But it is this restricted culvert that ultimately gives me strong pause with dam removal. And also, I think that the biggest one for dam removal, well, the other big one for me for dam removal was that the modeling shows an increased amount of flooding in the downstream neighborhoods in those 25 and under year storms. And just so we know that this can happen in Newton, so August 8th, 2023, 2.1 inches of rain fell in Newton. And this is what it looked like. So it's pretty impressive. You think about this is less rain than what they saw up in Hillsborough I don't know the exact times, the duration that it fell over for comparing those two storms, but certainly this was less rain than fell in that event in Hillsborough. Dexter Road is certainly something that we would need to think about with respect to the downstream erosion protection option. And that's it. Like I said, I have the narrative, which has a lot more information. I'm happy to go through all that if people would like, but otherwise we can open it up to questions. If we go too technical, I will probably hold some of those for the next meeting where we can have Jim Nickerson from GEI come back.
Thank you, Commissioner. Councilor Albright.
So thank you, Commissioner. We, having been on the working group, I've seen a little bit of this before, so it gives me a bit of a leg up. So I'm just wondering if we could ask Jim Nickerson from GEI to really look at these two options, the articulated concrete wall and the secant wall, and really study which one does a better job or does the best job at downstream protection, and what the costs. I mean, we know it's more expensive to build a secant wall, but we've had two consultants come in and look at this, and both consultants recommended the articulated concrete block. And I've done a little bit of my research. Claude and I are good friends now, and a secant wall doesn't come up often because it's more expensive than the articulated concrete block. So that may be one reason why he didn't bring us that option in the beginning. But I would love him, now that we're focusing on just those two solutions. It seems like we're focusing on those two solutions. Could he do some more research on, does it really protect the you made the statement that it protects the downstream side better than anything else the secant wall does. And I'm not, I would like him to weigh in on that. Claude doesn't necessarily agree with that comment. So I would just like Jim, who's our, consultant, to weigh in on it. The other thing that you said that was a little, the existing core wall wasn't so much as a dam as it was to protect from seepage. And Jim made the point in many of our meetings that the articulated concrete blocks protect from seepage on their own. That's why we don't really need to replace the existing core wall, because we have some belt and suspenders with respect to seepage. So I think that I would like to have Jim weigh in again on these two options in a very thorough way.
So thank you, Councilor Albright. I want to make sure that my statements are very clear. I certainly did not mean to imply that secant pile wall provides better downstream erosion protection than a downstream erosion protection system. What I was suggesting, or what I stated, was that the secant pile wall offers some level of downstream erosion protection because it is placed downstream of the existing core wall dam. So for that portion in between, it provides downstream erosion protection. It does not provide downstream erosion protection downstream of the secant pile wall dam. Jim Nickerson was at the last few working groups where the working group went through and graded the criteria matrix. He concurred with our findings. We did talk in detail about downstream erosion protection versus secant pile wall. So he has weighed in already. The working group has made the recommendation to proceed with secant pile wall dam. The intent, again, tonight is to present and update the Public Facilities Committee to get any last minute questions you might have on the recommendation, so that we can make sure at our next meeting where we come back and ask you to vote, that we can have those answers ready for you. But what Jim has said is that downstream erosion protection is a good, inexpensive solution to comply with ODS. Secant pile wall is a good solution to comply with ODS, and it is a system that will serve us very well for the next century.
One of the things that Claude, my buddy Claude, suggested was to build, you talked about channeling this morning, the water could channel under Dexter and go down. It talked about building, I forget the name of the wall, a toe wall or some kind of a wall where at the intersection of the articulated block and the Dexter Road, so that the water can't channel under it. So I would love Jim to look into that as well.
Yeah, so certainly I will say that if we were to completely re-engineer Dexter Road, we could harden Dexter Road and the edge of Bullow's Pond. But I will just remind everybody that if we do that, so downstream erosion protection already has significantly higher life cycle costs. If we increase the capital cost significantly for downstream erosion protection, now you have a system that is much more expensive to maintain, has a shorter life expectancy, and is almost as expensive as the Secant pile wall option. So I certainly ask Jim to weigh in specifically on that. But I think just from an intuitive standpoint, the more you start to invest in hardening the entire Dexter Road and the upstream slope, the more expensive the downstream option becomes. And it's already, from a life cycle cost analysis, significantly more expensive than the other options.
Yeah, I'll just say one final thing, just to be clear, Clyde kind of likes the secant wall solution also.
Okay, just so everybody in the committee is clear, Councilor Gordon, Grossman, and Donaldson. I'm just saying, all three of you were not with us last term, where we discussed a lot of this many times. And so if you're not understanding certain things, definitely ask and take time to study it. But I just wanted to make sure that you understood that, because of all of us, I think Councilor Albright is probably the most educated because she's on the committee. And I'm going to go to Councilor Kelly, but you had a clarifying question.
Just want to make sure, because you keep talking about articulated concrete blocks.
Yeah.
That's the same as the downstream
Yes.
erosion protection.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, Councilor
Good.
Kelly.
Thank you. I'll start where you just I've been on public facilities now for 9 years and have been through 7 years of the discussions about this, less than Councilor Albright. Until recently, never heard a word about a buried secant pile wall. That wasn't part of all the discussions we've had in the last few years, all the contentious, difficult discussions between ODS and Jim Nickerson and the consultant at DPW. They were all leading us towards the ACB. And it's frustrating for me that we're now just hearing about this new alternative that is popping to the top of the list. I'm happy to hear that, because I hated that concrete block, articulated concrete block with Matt's alternative with that wipeout of all the trees on one side. I was very much against that. And I did docket this item for a discussion on removing the dam back to nature, back to a wetland, just so we could have a conversation about it. I figured it wouldn't fly, mainly because of the property value aspect of it. So the one thing I have a question about that, you said that the removal would reduce the stormwater storage. If it were to revert to a natural wetland, you don't think it would have storage capacity?
It would still have storage capacity, yes. But in talking with Jim Nickerson, and we can get you the exact number if you're interested, but we would have a level of reduced storage capacity by removing the dam.
Okay, I'm not pushing for that anymore. That doesn't actually necessarily make sense to me. I'm not pushing for it. I'm glad it generated this conversation tonight. And I think I misunderstood you, as perhaps Councilor Albright did. I took my notes from what you said when we were talking about the buried secant pile wall, that you said it provides more downstream erosion control. Perhaps you didn't mean more than the downstream erosion protection. You meant maybe compared to whatever alternative you were talking about before that.
I'm sorry, you're 100% right. That was when I was talking about that compared to the new core wall dam.
Yeah, so it's only compared to one situation, because I thought you had said too, it provides more downstream erosion control, but that was only in relationship to the new core wall.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate you catching that and giving me a chance to clarify.
I'm a note taker. So I just did want to express my kind of frustration, and it has made me question the consultant's perspective that it seems like the recommendations keep changing. And when you say we'll talk with him again, he's the one who was pushing so hard, as did ODS, to go with the ACB, the articulated concrete block with the MATS system. I'm happy that that's not where we're headed now, but it does seem frustrating to me, having sat through 7 to 9 years of this, that now there's a whole new idea, which that happens. Good, but why has this not come up before? I'm really happy about the working group. I'm really happy about the continued input from some of the Bolas Pond people and Councilor Albright to do this. But like, why have we never heard about this before?
I would love to have been here 7 years ago on this working group. What I will say is that sometimes I think there is a tendency to look at the most inexpensive, easiest pathway towards compliance when you're in a situation like this. I think that it can sometimes be challenging to make a decision that requires a higher upfront investment, but ultimately a better overall product and a lower life cycle cost. I think it's as simple as that. So buried secant pile wall dams they didn't just become a thing in the last 6 months. So I can't tell you why that particular option was not considered. I think what surprises it, to be quite frank, what surprises me is that if we were considering a new core wall dam, which in many ways is very similar, why not buried secant pile wall, which is just as good, if not better, but less expensive? So I don't have a good answer for you, Councilor Kelly.
I don't at all mean to be attacking you on this. It's just like a frustrating thing having sat through this, and I felt like we were being very strong-armed before by DPW, who believed Nickerson, who wanted to comply with Office of Dam Safety, and I think we were being really railroaded in one particular direction, and we're not anymore. And I like how you started the whole thing saying if you were to start over back then, how you would be looking at it differently. And I really appreciated that perspective, because I could understand that as well. Let me just be one last question so I get it. The buried secant pile wall does not involve all of that tree removal?
So no, to be clear, there will end up being tree removal in no matter what option we do.
Is it the same?
It is less than
enormous clear cutting.
Yeah, no, it's definitely less than downstream erosion protection. There's no doubt about that. The full extent of how much less, I think, is going to be a product of some back and forth with ODS with respect to a few of the dam details. Their requirements are their requirements, but there is a little bit of wiggle room with how we design the dam that could influence a little bit of how many trees we need to remove. But I want to be very clear, and I've been clear with the community on this too. There will be tree removal. There is no option that involves no tree removal.
Not part of the presentation tonight. There was no discussion that I heard about tree removal on any of the options that you presented tonight.
Yeah, and I think I agree, and I think part of the reason why I did not is because there's tree removal on all of them. I will say the criteria matrix and the narrative does speak to tree removal, so I'm sure you saw that in the backup, but I didn't include it tonight because it's there for all of them.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
I don't know who was next.
Councilor Donovan.
Yeah.
Was I?
He knows.
Well, thank you for this, Mr. Rich. I have Mr. Rich. Mr. Morse. I have many questions, but I'll just start with a couple. Let's see, where do I want to start? When was the very first dam constructed here? Do we know?
Oh boy, I don't know if the current dam is the first. I would suspect that it is not, based on some of the old maps of Newton. But I couldn't tell you the very first dam, the date it was installed.
I thought it was also around the 1600s.
64.
1664. Okay,
No, I looked it up.
Yeah.
that's about what I thought. Yeah. So, I mean, I think it's worth noting that this is like a beloved, really beautiful, kind of incredible, and also unnatural resource in the city, in that it is a resource made of natural things, but that is a man-made thing in the city. And I want to, as I'm kind of like trying to understand the matrices that you provided, I want to understand one of them in the context of the presentation that was done on May 28th, which I have a copy of, and it says here that in that scenario, or in that presentation, all 4 options were said to comply with the Office of Dam Safety, but in the backup for tonight, that wasn't true anymore, and it said that the dam removal might comply and the other 3 do. Can you clarify why that changed in the last 20 days or so?
Yeah, so we started looking, and I actually spoke to it earlier this evening, but I didn't call that out as to connecting it to ODS. The debate, and this is something directly from Jim Nickerson at GEI, the debate is whether or not in the dam removal, whether Walnut Street and becomes an earthen dam, and whether or not ODS would consider that to need some level of oversight. And we don't know. I'm not even going to try to speculate, but the dam engineer is the one that raised it, so there's some level of concern there.
Okay, so basically it's because it's not that the Dexter Street condition would be not compliant, but it's that the sort of shifting of the dam to Walnut Street potentially as an earthen dam would make that one basically non-compliant potentially.
Yeah, exactly. And to put it, I guess the other way to say this is that dam removal would comply with ODS, but we could be, by removing the dam, creating a situation where there is a earthen system that could breach under certain circumstances. And maybe ODS says, that's not our problem. It's not a dam. That's a Newton problem. Or maybe they look at it and say, well, no, you kind of have shifted the dam just downstream a bit. I don't know. But that was Jim Nickerson, our dam engineer, that raised that.
Okay, and that was something he kind of arrived at since the presentation on May 28th.
Yes.
Okay. And you said you would talk a little bit about the lifetime cost of the dam removal being so high. Is that because you're saying that the culverting work or the downstream construction work that would need to happen as a result of that is high, basically, and so if we did the dam removal, we'd have to have that $200 million investment in all of those culverts?
So great question. Primarily, yes, but I'm glad you asked it because I'm going to expand a little further on the dam removal. There are the upfront cost that is included in the backup and that I presented tonight does not include several things that I think are, quite frankly, I think they are realistic costs, but they're very difficult to quantify. I think it would be foolish for us to assume that there would not be a lawsuit if we tried to remove the dam and remove Bullows Pond. That lawsuit would drag this project out many, many years, and it would, the escalation alone on the project would cost us many millions of dollars. I wouldn't even begin to tell you what the legal costs would be and what the ultimate implications in the courts would be on this. So there's that. There's also then in the dam removal option, let's say for argument's sake that we created kind of for lack of a better word, a very large bioswale in the pond basin. What we would need to do is one of two things. We would either need to much, much more frequently dredge City Hall ponds to ensure that we're not putting too much sediment down into that basin, or we would need to do what we're doing currently, or what we just did over by Countryside, where we are kind of surgically removing silt from the brook and from the wetlands adjacent to it in that area to ensure that we're maintaining whatever stormwater storage and infiltration capacity would exist in that basin. That is a big unknown. Honestly, I did not capture that in the life cycle cost analysis because I wouldn't even know where to begin, and it would probably be a massive range. It could be very little if you do it correctly. It could be a lot if you don't. A lot of it depends on how aggressive Newton's investment in stormwater maintenance and management would be over the next 100 years.
Okay. That's helpful. Thank you. I'm gonna leave it there for now and then I'll come back with more later.
Thank you, Councilor Lomback. Okay, Councilor Getz, Grossman, and then Malachi.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair. I actually wanted to go back to that slide where you had the secant wall piling with Dexter Road, you know, in terms of the backside.
Sure. One sec.
Right, that's exactly the one. Thank you. So I'm curious, just even in terms of, is that wall going to be visible in any way? Are you going to be able to visualize it when you're driving by?
No,
Okay, so there's no benefit in terms of creating a higher wall?
there is. Yeah, no, we can create a higher wall, but it's underground. So we can raise the top of the dam wall, but it wouldn't be above ground.
Okay, I'm just curious because I want to see additional capacity with it, you know, in terms of like, I see the differential right now in terms of you can, in your images, you can kind of get a sense of like what the, you know, the footage, you know, and someone who's an engineer could figure out exactly how much capacity it gives you, right?
Yeah, one sec, let me grab. So this slide helps show this.
Okay,
If we were, so the buried secant pile wall, don't quote me on this, directionally, it would be somewhere over in here. I think one of the things that we would work out in the next phase of design is how much above the existing concrete core wall would we go? We actually were talking about this in the working group today. Again, I'm no dam engineer. I think we can absolutely increase the top of the secant pile wall dam. I don't know how close you can bring that up to Dexter Road, because I would imagine that from a structural standpoint, you would not want the dam too close because you want some level of buffer with traffic going over the top of it. But that'll be something that we'd have to ask the engineers to take a look at.
yeah, and I'm just even thinking mathematically, there could be a calculation so that then you would understand the, you know, all they talk about, the 100-year storm, the 250, that height would be, you know, proportional or placed so that then a 500-year storm would never breach that secant wall, correct?
Yeah,
That's
so
what my head is thinking, you know, just out of like, because it's based on a whole bunch of other conditions, but I'm just sort of, you know, thinking that height is pretty critical, you know.
it is critical, and it's a really good point, and I think we should study it, and I personally think we should raise the top of dam height. But what I will say is that if we start talking like 500-year storms and insane amounts of water,
Right,
just
no,
bear in mind that you're going to flood all of Dexter Road and Walnut. It's going to be cascading left and right of the dam.
right.
So it's great to raise it because for a variety of reasons, but in those very extreme situations, well, the dam won't breach and you'll be retaining a lot of water in Bullo's Pond, which is good for all the folks downstream. The water ultimately, when it gets to that level, is going to be left and right. You're gonna have water everywhere.
Yeah, okay, and that's the other question I was having, because I was trying to, you know, because we don't have this image, you know, in terms of our backup material. This is new for me, and this is the first time I'm seeing it. So I was trying to understand just exactly the relationship of this wall to the existing dam, you know, and I can see, because I was terrified of seeing the water overspilling on the sides, you know, the existing dam, and then getting underneath if in fact you're the whatever it was called, the interlocking block thing. You know, just getting washed out from underneath, you know, just in terms of, you know, making its way, the water, making its way around and, you know, floating away that potential, you know, the interlocking blocks. So it sort of seems as if it lines up pretty much with the existing dam right now. But how does it relate to the existing spillway?
The existing what?
The spillway where?
Still.
Right there, is it go underneath it? Does it, you know, I just don't, because I don't know if it won't go through it. So is it underneath it?
So I'd have to get Jim to get the exact termination details when it goes up to the spillway itself. I wouldn't want to speak out of turn on that.
Okay, because it sort of seems that that's a vulnerability point. And then that sort of
Yeah.
leads to my next thought is just about just all of the infrastructure downstream that needs to be improved. You know, I just sort of feel like we're solving this immediate problem, but we've got a huge downstreams, you know, the whole culvert and getting to Watertown that really needs investment. You know, I just sort of feel like it's under capacity right now, and we need to think about that too. But it's not for now, and it's not for you, but it's just something that really is concerning to me, because I sort of feel as if we need to think that through.
Well, it's like you served this right up for me. So one of the things that I mentioned to the community is that we have a team of folks who are working on our comprehensive stormwater investment and maintenance program. That kicked off a little while back now, this year, but I think we're on track to complete that by the end of 2027, which is a ways out. There will be progress along the way, but we absolutely recognize that we need to do better with respect to maintenance, and we need to invest more with respect to capital. Stormwater systems, I mean, it is true. And if I would encourage anybody who has the opportunity, take a look at the updated flood maps for Newton, and look at all of Newton. Don't look at just one location. In those extreme events, Newton is very low lying. We have a lot of bodies of water. We have a lot of buried bodies of water. It's impactful. We have a lot of work to do. We're not alone. There are a lot of communities faced with the same exact challenges all across the country, but we recognize we have work to do, and we're working on it.
Yeah. And lastly, I just can't thank you enough, because I sort of feel for the first time on this topic, I really feel that we did the scope. You know, we really got really solid information, and I am like just elated that we're at a place where we can make really solid decisions. So thank you.
Thank you.
Councilor Grossman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So Councilor Getz took this exactly where my mind was, but just a couple quick clarifying questions. So it's probably obvious by the name, but the buried wall, to Councilor Getz's point, means this is 100% completely underground, and what you were just discussing was what the distance should be between the top of that wall and the bottom of Dexter Road.
Actually, I believe that when it's referred to as a buried Seacamp Powell wall, it's talking about the fact that it's buried in bedrock. It has more to do with how it's anchored than it does the fact that it's not exposed at all. But it happens to be true both ways, because it is not exposed, it is buried, and it's buried in bedrock.
Can you explain with a little, just try, how logistically that is done? Like,
Yeah,
how
actually,
open up a vertical plane in the earth to get a wall down there. But I mean, I can see this picture. I suppose I'm just having a hard time visualizing, that you open it up and get these drilling things.
The same way they get like bridge things into the ground, they just force them in.
so right here, what ends up happening is they basically use I'm going to use non-construction terms, but they use a very large cylinder, and they drill a very large wide hole into the ground. They pour concrete into it. They let that cure. They remove the very large cylinder. They do that again and again. And you'll notice that every other one has a slightly different design. This creates that interlocking design of Seacamp Powell wall dams. And ultimately, that's how they create it. Does that help?
Yes. How long does it take to build such a thing?
I don't know. It's a good question. I would imagine that a lot of it depends on the length of the dam. And I should say, the exact length of the dam is something that we'll be studying in the design phase as well. I don't want anybody thinking that my sketch nails that thing down completely at this stage. We need to take a hard look at that.
Okay, and to my colleague's point about this being in the lifespan of this conversation about what to do, you know, in this sort of modern time with the dam, where did this idea come from, the buried sea camp wall?
So this was actually raised by some of our community members who had a few residents in Newton who are dam engineers. They ultimately recommended that we take a look at this. I asked GEI to do it, and I started looking into it as well. And GEI then put it on the list and added it to the conversation, and ultimately it went from there.
That's really interesting. And actually, I really appreciate knowing that. I've long felt that the expertise we have in our community is such a special feature and kind of privilege that we have in Newton. So I think that's a notable thing. I suppose my last question also to Councillor Getz's point, what had stood out for me from the last time I remember attending a meeting, and maybe, I can't remember if we had a committee of the whole or something, but I remember the articulated blocks and I remember that image. And then I remember those really scary maps of the flooding effects and thinking, oh my, you know, no matter what we do, someday a day is going to come where we have these what looked like really catastrophic effects to the city and people and property. As this is getting closer to the end of the process, could we have a little bit of an update about what that looks like with this versus the last time that we had that conversation? I maybe I'm remembering two different conversations, but I seem to recall that big scary flooding thing being presented at the same time as that articulated all right.
Yes.
So I guess I would just like to know, what does this do to that prior discussion?
So the flood models don't change significantly over that time period. What would be different if you were to look at these different options? So GEI already did some floodplain models for dam removal. Those were presented. Those are posted, but I can make sure that you get links to that. But for the other options, for downstream erosion protection, the flood models would not change significantly unless the downstream erosion protection failed and then resulted in a breach. And then what you could do is you could take the volume of water that exists in Bullows, but only down to the bottom of dam. I want to be clear, there'd be some water left. You would take that volume and essentially send it rapidly downstream. I think I'm not going to be able to give you much comfort in general if you're talking about these massive storms, because of a lot of Newton is going to be experiencing flooding. I think the key that we're trying to avoid here is a dam breach. Because if a breach occurs in a large storm event where Bullows is very, very high, like Dexter Road high, you are going to immediately overwhelm the culvert and you are going to send a massive amount of water downstream. When Newton experiences flooding situations, you have some level of warning that there's water coming, and homeowners can do a little bit to try to minimize the damage to their property. Not a lot, but a little bit. In a dam breach, you don't have much of an option to do anything, because you've got, for lack of a better word, a tidal wave coming at you. In those situations, you're not doing much. You're just hoping, you're focused on life safety at that point, really making sure your loved ones get out okay.
Can I add something to that? I think it might help. I think that this committee never heard about the new low-level outlet that Jim is proposing, which could let water out like David Meekley still, can't we just get the water out? And I think Jim has talked about building another outlet, not just a spillway, but another low-level outlet that brings the water down and could lower the level of the pond by using this low-level outlet. So he's thinking about that.
That's obviously an attractive thing to think about,
Yes.
and anything that
It's on Josh's maps, but you didn't talk about it.
I didn't. Thank you, Councilor Albright. I appreciate you mentioning that. So yeah, the new low-level outlet, I think, is a very exciting opportunity. That is not something we have fully designed yet. That would be something that would happen in the next design phase. But Ultimately, as Councilor Albright said, that new low-level outlet would allow us to, depending on how we design it, even automatically, in advance of those storms, lower Bullows Pond level so that we are creating additional stormwater storage capacity to minimize the impact downstream and reduce the kind of demand, if you will, or charge that occurs to Laundry Brook. So that is certainly something that will be part of the project. The exact details will get worked out down the road.
So consider that a question of more detail on that, where the water goes.
Yeah.
Where does the water go?
And then my final question is somewhat to you, Chair, which is my recollection of where this item stands before the committee is that this committee doesn't really have an approval vote on options. Is that right?
I think, I don't know. I mean, I think we give a recommendation.
Through this item?
No.
No, I
No.
think,
One of the prior-
I think the administration will docket something.
Yes.
Not the item for the.
Right.
This was just to talk about this.
But
Right.
in terms of a recommendation, I'm assuming that's more of a everybody getting on board and rowing in the same direction rather than an actual authority thing.
Yeah, so to answer the very first question, I think I heard the low-level outlet, the water goes ultimately to the Charles, but through Laundry Brook. So what you would be doing is you'd slowly be releasing water from Bullows Pond when it's not raining, so that when it does rain, you have more storage capacity in Bullows Pond. The next question, yes, we are not looking for a vote, and this docket item wouldn't make sense for any kind of vote. We're actually, we would be docketing something new, and ultimately, we would be asking for the committee to take a straw vote, basically a nod that they agree we're headed in the right direction. We don't need a formal vote for this, but we certainly don't want to make a major decision and go down the road of a major project without having the committee giving us a general sense that you're on board.
I'm assuming eventually it would come down a financial pathway of a vote.
Into the full.
Exactly. And to that point, Councilor Grossman, the last thing any of us would want to do is go through the entire design process and then come to you and ask for a bond and have you all go, no, we actually like downstream erosion protection.
Okay, thank you. Also.
No.
Okay. I'm gonna keep it in committee and then we're gonna go to Councilor Maliki, but Councilor Gordon?
I'm sorry. We received a letter from the Charles River Watershed Association that they've been asked to engage in this discussion. I see that Lisa is part of this, so I'm hoping some of the questions in this letter were answered, but specifically that organization, CRWA, they're requesting to review the full hydrologic and hydraulic model, as well as any associated culvert structural information used to make the recommendation. I'm wondering if that's, maybe they could liaise directly with you. Is that appropriate to get some of their questions answered?
Yeah, absolutely. I think what I would probably do is I'd have them, I'm not a big fan of being a middleman on this, so I would probably put them directly in touch with Jim Nickerson at GEI, because I am going to quickly find myself well over my skis if I try to handle that conversation.
Perfect answer. I wasn't exactly sure exactly what I was asking to have done, but that seems like a great answer. And that way they can go through all of these questions that they have.
And I said this at the community meeting and I will say it here too. In a different set of circumstances, I would be wholeheartedly, no offense to our friends in the Bullows Pond neighborhood, in a different set of circumstances, I would be wholeheartedly supporting dam removal. But as I said at the very beginning, every situation is different. And the reason why I wanted to make this clear at the end here, or towards the end, is that I don't want anybody who happens to listen to this or read about this to believe that our position, my position on dam removal here has any bearing whatsoever on any other project where they're evaluating dam removal in any other community across this country, because they are all very, very different. And in many cases, they can be wildly successful.
I think that point's well taken, and I think that your points around lawsuits, that it's a natural place of beauty, that people have investment in the Bullows Pond, makes this a unique situation. So,
Can I
Okay, thank you for saying that.
Let me just go to Council Malachi.
Okay,
Sorry.
I'll report myself.
Yeah, and then I'll go to Donald Red and then, go ahead.
Yeah, okay, so I've sort of accumulated a list of points here. First of all, Josh, while you were speaking, it occurred to me, there's another analogy between airbags and the articulated concrete block in that airbags also protect you in the first collision, but if there's a second collision right after the first collision, they've already deployed. Somebody said that, somebody seemed to think the, question about Walnut Street, becoming a dam was like, just came up, but actually, Jim Nickerson was talking about that from the very beginning, because I was interested in how much water we could get through the dam. And he said if it's too much water, Walnut Street becomes the dam. And he said that from the very beginning.
Thank you. That's one of the disadvantages of having not been here for the first 7 years. I first heard it 2 weeks ago.
Okay, well, yeah, you were busy with like 5 schools and a senior center.
Yeah.
Also in defense of Jim Nickerson, I think my strong impression from paying attention to this since 2020 was that the prior administration was kind of laser focused on getting ODS off our backs. And they said multiple times, we're only doing this because ODS is making us. And I think their focus was on, after we objected to the single recommendation of the downstream slope erosion protection proposed by the previous consultant, they went back and got more opinions, but it was still downstream slope erosion and something else being concrete core wall and a steel sheet pile wall. So they didn't really go further than that. I don't know why they did not look at secant pile wall, but I think the important, and it sort of came up, I think, in Councilor Guess's question, the big difference between the secant pile wall and the discarded plan, possibility of the sheet pile wall or the concrete core wall is that you're actually drilling into the bedrock. You can drill, if you want to drill 6 feet down, 10 feet down, however far down the consultant thinks that is going to get us sort of the maximum cost-effective solid embedding into the bedrock. With the secant pile wall, it's basically like a kind of like a soil auger. It's you're drilling with a cylindrical thing. It's like we do for pilings, or what we're doing at the schools with the geothermal, getting deep enough to accomplish the goal. And that's what makes it really solid. That and the interlocking and cylinders will be reinforced with steel. Let's see, the lowering the sort of new improved and modernized low-level outlet system will, I think, make it a lot easier and convenient to actually lower the pond, which is something that, I've learned from the Billows Pond Association people, used to be done routinely in the past, and somehow we got away from it. Maybe there was nobody who felt comfortable doing it. You have to sort of get into this, tube in the ground. Maybe they didn't want to do it too often and wear it out, but with a sort of modernized and hopefully automated equipment, it could be, and better weather prediction now, because we're not allowed to count sort of preemptive lowering of the pond level as a protective measure by ODS because they are concerned that people will get tired of seeing the pond level, lowered, and we wouldn't actually end up doing it. So they don't want to count on that. But if it was done in the past, residents in the area did not object, and if it's easier to do again with the better weather predictions, if we're actually expecting, the hurricane or whatever, we kind of have a lot better idea of when we're going to get a lot of rain. So that'll make that more practical. And the question about how the transition between the Seacamp Pile wall and the spillway itself would work. The spillway itself, if you go down there, you can look at it. If you look at videos, actually I have a video, but the spillway itself is bedrock. So you're basically be coming up to that, and you'd have bedrock in the spillway itself and the Seacamp piles adjacent. I think that's about it.
Thank you, Councilor Mallett.
Yeah.
All right, Councilor Donovan and then Albright.
Did Councilor Albright just have a clarification?
Okay.
The Councilor Gordon talked about the Charles River folks getting access to Jim. So former Councilor Down sent Councilor Damerved and myself an article about dam removal in Connecticut, I think it was. Pennsylvania, and they were actually doing it for free with American Rivers. And so Councilor Donovan invited the man who was in the article to come and talk to us and meet us there. And he said, he came, we talked, he said, I need data. And I think I asked for data, but I was told there wasn't anything written down. But if you could get this man, we can give you his email address and he can get contact with Jim. He could have the same conversation about dam removal because he does this all the time. And, he says, I'll advise you. If it's not a good idea, I'll let you know that. So could you make that same offer to, I think his last name was Finch.
Fink.
Okay.
Sure thing.
Okay, that would be great. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I'm glad Councilor Albright brought this up. We did read this very interesting article that basically said, well, there's one option that we can do for free. And I was like, wow, free is very interesting in the context of municipal budgets. So that was the context in which I said, sir, could you come explain how free happens? And he basically explained that they're a nonprofit organization that gets grants and funding from like Army Corps of Engineers and others to facilitate dam removals. And so they can do things that are free to the local taxpayer, basically. It's not that it magically happens without money being moved around, but free to local taxpayers, interesting. And so that brought me to the next question, which is, have funding sources been considered for any of these options, or is that part of the kind of thinking of how, where money could come from for this, for any of these?
Yeah, so a few things on that front. One, I will just point out that even if dam removal itself is free, all of the other costs of dam removal are not free. So, all the other costs make the dam removal portion of the project look very, very small. So just food for thought. On how we fund the project overall, I would imagine that it is probably going to be a handful of different funding sources. We did, the program that we had applied for escapes me, but I can send it out. We applied for a design and construction grant program for the Bullows Pond project. So I can get you the numbers, but it's not going to pay for all of it. It's not even going to pay for half of it, pay for a small portion of it, but that certainly would help. And then I would imagine that when we get further in and get better refined numbers and cash flows, we can start looking at, it would definitely be a bond. We'll have to figure out the term of the bond. It's a very long life expectancy, so it could be a longer term bond. And then once we've made that decision, we could start working with the CFO and utilities and ultimately the city council to figure out, is this a bond that gets paid for out of stormwater fees? Is it a combination of stormwater fees and other one-time monies, or is it part of our debt service? There's a multitude of ways that it could be funded.
That's really helpful to hear, Mr. Morrison. Yeah, I guess talking about how this gets funded and the life expectancy and the timeline, it's sounding like many of us are feeling like there's a $200 million investment or so between Bulldoze Pond Dam and the Charles River that presumably kind of needs to happen over the next 100 years, or so, or something. And so, is that, I don't know, as we're thinking about the life expectancy of a dam option here and this project and the way that we're going to pay for it, are we kind of planning for like what a council is doing? I know maybe it sounds crazy, but in 100 years, are we planning for what that council's options are, and how they're thinking about it? Are we preparing to make this $200 million investment in our flood infrastructure or stormwater infrastructure as part of this plan that's coming out in 2027?
Yeah, so the intent of that plan is to lay out all of the capital needs associated with our entire stormwater system. So the short answer is yes. So hold on tight when you see the bottom line number there. It's gonna be big.
It's like we're our pension plan.
Yeah, but that's, I mean, I'm sure it sounds a little bit crazy, but there'll be a council in 100 years and
It's realistic.
it's realistic, and we want them to have maybe better options than we have, right? So that's good to hear. Thanks, Mr. Morris.
All right, any other questions? Okay. Great discussion on this item.
I would move to NAN this item.
Okay. There's a motion to NAN this item. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, the item is NAN unanimously. And that's the extent of our work. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody.
That was really great, thank you.
Sorry.
Recording stopped.
You should have told me sooner that there was no audio coming through those videos. That must have been super awkward.
But we were like, okay, we'll fine. Like, you might want to talk, but.
Yeah.
I mean, in your school videos, Josh, where you always have narration over them, I was like, weird that you just walk around the woods all the time. Sure.
He must think we know what he's thinking.
Yeah.
I could like hear his voice in my head being like, and here's where this is. That's it. Based on this, like, let's get off track.
Again, thank you very much, everybody. I really appreciate it.
Polite, right?